Hi, I'm Joanne, and welcome to the Animal Communication Business Series. 8 episodes, 8 shifts, and the real journey from practitioner to business owner. If you're new here, this series is for professional animal communicators who are already doing the work. You have clients, you charge for sessions, you're visible, but you want your practice to be sustainable, intentional, and profitable. In the last few series, we've explored what it means to step into business ownership, moving from reactive to intentional, and beginning to put structure in place. Today, we're pausing for a reality check because this is where many communicators quietly get stuck. You are showing up, you're posting, you're trying to be visible everywhere. You're working harder and harder, but the income isn't reflecting the effort. And it's exhausting. So the question becomes, why am I doing so much and still not seeing the results I expected? In this episode, we're focusing on something that's often misunderstood: the difference between being visible and being visible in a way that actually converts, because more content isn't always the answer. Sometimes it's about getting clearer on who you are speaking to, where you are showing up, and why someone would choose to work with you. As always, I'm joined by business architect Becs McNeill, and today we are unpacking why effort without direction leads to burnout and what starts to change when you bring clarity into your visibility. So, Bex, why do so many people feel like they're doing everything right, but still not seeing the income reflect that?
Such a biggie. I see this all the time. And generally, it's because effort and strategy are just not the same thing. If only how hard we worked was indicative of how much we could earn, because we would all be bisquillionaires by now. And sadly, this isn't just in our world, in the online space and in animal communication, especially. In lots and lots of industries, we see that, the effort and the energy that people put into their work isn't necessarily commensurate with what they're paid. So, unfortunately, it isn't just how hard you work that dictates how much you're going to earn. Now, with visibility, we kind of think that that's the answer to everything. And we need to be posting and showing up and doing all the reels and the stories and the newsletters and everything everywhere. But without any kind of strategy behind it, what tends to happen is that you're being busy, but it's not necessarily the right kind of things that are actually going to make the boat go any faster. So that whole 80-20 rule that applies to pretty much everything. 80% of your results are going to come from 20% of your efforts. So it's looking at the things that do actually move the needle, and making sure that we're focusing on those things really. I mean, some people will never even actually look at any of the numbers or look at anything that does move the needle and try and work that out. They just keep doing the things because that's what they've been told or expected to do. So if you are feeling like you're running to stand still, then it's always good to stop at some point and get yourself reorientated and work out where it is that you want to go, because it's not always about, am I doing enough? It's actually asking yourself, is what I'm doing going to get me where I want to go?
Gosh, that is key. I've got so many questions.
Oh
Sorry
no, you
to,
asked a
sorry
question
to.
and I answered it, and now there's more.
Now I got even more questions. I think what I'd like to do is just almost like remind ourselves, like, why do we work so hard? And it's a programming.
Yeah.
From whenever. It's like you're considered a good person if you work hard. We're always encouraging work harder, work harder. And then there's also this programming that buys into the belief if you work hard, you'll deserve to get what you get. If you're
Yeah.
late, you're so, and then the opposite is, oh, if you're lazy, then you
Mm.
deserve not to be successful. But actually, in reality, we can see people that we think are lazy and they are successful. I always remember, like in school, like the belief came from school and the programming, work hard so that you'll pass your exams.
Yeah.
Yeah. Work hard so that you'll get A grades. That's not always the case because there were so many examples of where you worked hard, you spent hours doing your homework, and you still got a C grade. And then you have
Mm.
this other classmate that seems to be like, whatever, and they get A. So then we start to think that they're lucky or that that's not right or that's not fair. But
Mm.
exactly as you said, working harder does not necessarily mean you're going to reap a higher revenue in terms of business. So we got to get that straight first.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I see, and myself, when I started, I thought it was all about bringing in as many consults, one-to-ones as possible. Because, like, if I see my diary full, I'm a good person, I'm working hard, and I'm busy. And busy means I'm doing well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But guess what? I can have a really busy month, feel exhausted, and then look at what's coming in and look at what's going out. And then suddenly it's like, oh, hang on a minute, something doesn't tally. So I just wanted to bring that in terms of where are we getting this belief that working hard is almost like the key to success. And what we're saying here is that not necessarily.
Yeah. And we've been conditioned for years. I mean, if you think about the Industrial Revolution, they wanted workers, and that's where all of this has come from. It was work hard, play hard. It was like an honest day's work, and all of those kind of phrases that get passed down through the generations that stick with you, either consciously or subconsciously. And so we repeat those patterns, but we're not living in that environment anymore. We're not living in that kind of society anymore. And I talk a lot about leverage, and I have to make it very clear to people that leverage isn't about being lazy. And I do talk about work less and live more because there are ways that we can leverage technology. There are ways that we can leverage relationships. There are ways that we can do lots of things smarter rather than harder. I get very excited by stuff like that. I think it's somewhere inside of me. There's a time and motion person going, there's a quicker way to do this. We can't, we don't need to do it that way. And it is purely because the world that we're living in is moving so fast. To keep up, you can't keep doing things the way that they were always done, or you've got to opt out of doing it and trying to keep up. So it's you understanding what success looks like for you in the first instance. And so many people don't even know what that is. We tend to get there by going, what do you not want? It's easier to kind of go at it from that perspective. But once you've got an idea of what success really does mean for you, you can then engineer the things that are going to help you get to that place. And, we've been told so many times that you've got to be visible, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And one of the best quotes I heard a couple of years back was Harry Styles. He was in an interview and he said, don't confuse visibility with success. And just because you see people showing up everywhere all the time doesn't mean that what they're doing is actually getting them where they want to go or they're enjoying what they're doing. It just isn't the measure that people think it is.
Yeah. And in a way, this is really what this episode is about, is that we don't want to avoid we don't want to avoid visibility because you have to have visibility. So if we go back to the examples we had in the last episode where we talked about if we had 30 shops, animal communication, visibility is really what you put on your sign on the outside or that you actually have a shop front. So, but it's learning. I think this is really what we want to get into, isn't it? What do we really mean by visibility that aligns with what we want to do, who we want to reach, and what our definition of success is. So I remember when I started social media wise, it was really only Facebook. I don't remember Instagram, definitely not TikTok. There was Facebook and there was LinkedIn as kind of like the main platforms. Now there's so many different platforms. So I think that's the other
Hmm.
challenge as well. So Can we go through that? When we talk about visibility with a strategy and knowing where your audience is, and then you have all these platforms. I think that's why we people feel pressured because it's
Yeah.
like, got to post it, got to post it, got to post it everywhere. And then you can get apps that will say, oh yeah, you just, get this app and now it can post it to all platforms in one go for you. What do you think about that?
Oh, what do I think about that? Well, funnily enough, when I first started out online, I was teaching people how to use social media for business purposes. It was one of the main things that I used to teach people because I'd been doing it for years in my employed role. Um, and it was all kind of new back then in 2010. People were like, but Facebook, that's all just posting about you know, what you've eaten at the weekend and this, that, and the other. And I was like, but it's a way to connect with people that you wouldn't have had access to previously, and it's a way to build relationships. But what tends to, or what's happened in those last 10, 16 years is that we have just been creating at such a rate of knots that it just becomes noise. And especially when there's no strategy behind it, it is just busy work. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's got an outcome to it. So if you take an animal practitioner who's posting 5 times a week for 6 months, they're getting likes, lovely comments, they're getting some followers, but their posts are perhaps all over the place in terms of who they're for, what they do, what they stand for, no clear threads, no obvious steps, no kind of connection between the content and the offer, like we were talking about last week. So that's visibility, but it's not necessarily attracting the right people and it's not necessarily converting people onto the next step. So 6 months of effort and bookings haven't moved, but not because she's not doing anything, but because it doesn't necessarily have an outcome in mind. So I think I spoke about it right back at the beginning is I have a thing called the superfan cycle. And so it's a framework that I talk people through. There's just 4 stages to it to make it really, really simple to get people to think about that journey of moving your clients through a process. 4 stages, A, B, C, D. A is attract, B is for build, C is for convert, and D is for deliver. And visibility sits in that attract stage. It's the bit that gets people into your world. If you're not really sure about how to move them from knowing about you to actually liking and trusting you, then that's where that journey ends. So you've got to understand who you're trying to attract in order to be able to be in the places that they are. Otherwise, I can be skipping down the road, shouting to everybody about how brilliant I am, and nobody's listening because they're just not the right people. I always liken this to dating because it helps people get their heads around it. If you're looking for Prince Charming and to be swept off your feet by somebody who's rich and glamorous, you don't hang out in a Wetherspoons because you're just not going to find those people there. So you've got to be in the right places, saying the right thing to the right people at the right time, which sounds like a lot, but with a bit of effort and a bit of practicing and a bit of curiosity, you can find those people and go start hanging out with them as opposed to just broadcasting, which is what a lot of people do in terms of visibility.
Yeah, you could kind of in the old-fashioned analogy visual, you could just get a box to stand on in the middle of the town square and start talking about what you believe and what you're good at. And you also understand that it comes with that territory, how you're going to be received.
Yeah.
So every single day, if you're standing in the middle of the town square, just shouting out, not really directing, not just the people that you are kind of saying this to, but also what are you actually saying? So maybe we'll go there
Yeah.
too. So yes, okay. So let's say you found where your audience hangs out, your like-minded people, and you got clear with that. What about the messaging? Because we hear, particularly nowadays, that it's all about the messaging. So if you get the right people and you're not clear with your messaging, what happens?
Well, like we said last week, in terms of the offers, if clarity isn't there, if people aren't sure about what it is, they're like, okay, that's nice. So what? So you've got to be able to make it really clear to people that you are either calling them to take some action or you are rallying them to take some form of stand against something. You know, you've got to understand what's going on for them, what it is that they need. And quite often we talk about being problem aware, solution aware in your messaging so that people can recognize themselves in those situations. So if you think about the last time that you perhaps followed somebody online and then actually ended up buying from them, I always get my clients to think about this because most people, unless they are in business, are just going around and consuming. They're not looking at the journey, the buyer's journey. They're not looking at that sales process. Whereas if you start looking at it now, every time you buy something, every time you connect with somebody and start having that relationship build, you start to see how it works. So I'm not suggesting go out there and buy all sorts of things, but every time you do, look at the process that you went through, look at the journey that they took you on. At some point, they will have, when you found them, said something that made you feel understood, or they made you feel a certain way that kept you coming back to them, or you got to a point where booking felt like that's the next step for me because I've kind of I know enough about this person. I like the way that they are. They seem to resonate with me, and so therefore, what do I do next? Now, our job as that business owner is to understand our people, understand that process, and make sure that it is a beautiful user experience so that they feel held and looked after all the way through, so that they are having a lovely experience, so that why wouldn't they then say yes when we give them the invitation to come and work with us? The superfan cycle, the ABCD, you can start to see then how things don't work at each of those stages. So if you're very good at attracting lots of people, then generally you're probably very good at telling stories and gathering people, but you may not be very good then at taking them through to build the relationship to go deeper. I know lots of people that have built these great big lists. They've got loads of followers on social media, but none of those people are actually converting. So we can see there that there's not a problem with attraction. There's probably not a problem with the build of relationships with people because people are staying and they're commenting or they're engaging. But what's not happening is the conversion. Having that cycle shows you which part of that cycle needs for you to work on it. So talking the right language to the right people absolutely depends on where those people are in their buyer's journey, in their experience of perhaps working with an animal communicator. Maybe they've never done it before, so they need a bit more education about what it is and what to expect. Or you might have somebody who has been there before, and so they're ready and eager to get booked in with you a lot quicker. So the conversation will be about how, what, where, when, rather than this is what you need to expect. This is how it can work. So look at your people in terms of the place that they're at. What do they need to hear from you? And what kind of questions do they need answered to help them make a decision?
You said something that kind of made my ears kind of prick up because it's so important in the animal communication community. And when we start to think about attracting clients, maybe one of the words that we don't realize is important is the word safe. Clients need to feel safe because a lot of the times our services are helping them with a problem, helping them with their stress. So we can get so caught up with, am I good enough? Am I almost clever enough? Am I the best animal communicator? But you talk about the customer's journey, and you've just made me think about my own journey over the years. And if we look at what you've just been describing, the visibility to the right audience, to the messaging, I can apply that with what I am so passionate about, helping pet parents with end of life conversations with their animals. So, in terms of visibility, yes, I want to start talking about aspects of that. But in terms of where are my audience, I realize now that they tend to be people who have just come out from the vet's office
Mhm.
with a diagnosis, with news that they did not expect, or news that they've gone in and they've been hoping, whether they get the scan results or test results. So it's like knowing how to liaise, for example, with that clientele or have a way in to connect with vets or vet nurses and also animal hospice practitioners because they will also get people that they might refer and pet doulas, animal death doulas. So that's really been my understanding instead of going, oh yeah, I'm into animal communication and end of life and just it's like, no, it's such a sensitive topic that I
Mhm.
also have to be mindful how I post on social media about it as well. So I move in those circles more and more. So that's kind of like the visibility with the right audience. And the messaging, because you used the word safe, that is so true. We need, like you say, some kind of structure that allows them to connect with me, generally an inquiry to begin with, like a safe space, a private space. You don't feel like they have to comment on my social media post. We forget sometimes when we post on social media, we think no one's interacting, no one's making any comments. But actually, if you're posting something sensitive, people are very aware that when they put a comment, it's
Yeah,
public, so they don't want to do that. So it's giving people a way to know that they can contact you. And this is exactly what you mean, isn't it? It's building that relationship behind the scenes, behind
yeah,
the kind of upfront visibility. So we then move into the third thing, which is what you were saying, and I think this is the key point, is linking visibility with outcome. And again, I don't think that's obvious. It's like when we think outcome, oh, the outcome is I want to help people, but I think that's not specifically the outcome that helps you to know how you approach visibility. So can we look at outcome now?
yeah, of course. It's everything that we do should have a purpose to it. I mean, sometimes, we get a bit busy and, we get a bit caught up in things. But every so often, and I have this kind of time on generally on a Monday afternoon. So before my week has even started, I have like my kind of CEO time so that I have my thinking time, my time to work on my business instead of I'm working in it. So during that time, I'm going to be looking at typically, which of my stages of my client life cycle am I attracting? What kind of messages am I putting out there in terms of social media that's attracting attention? Where are people coming from when they come to me so that I can start doing and taking the action that gets the results. Otherwise, I could just be doing all the things all the time, spinning all the plates and getting myself nowhere. And as a mum of young adults now, or over the years, it's been raising children, a pet parent, a daughter, a wife, and all these things, my time and my effort is limited. And so I've got to make sure that I'm using it wisely. And that it is the things that I'm doing are getting me the outcomes. Now, you don't have to go into all sorts of analytics and be tracking web clicks and this, that, and the other to start with, because I know that's another thing that starts getting people a bit scared. They don't want to go there, they don't want to look at it, they don't know what they're looking at. But you should be getting a feel for what's working in your business, even just a finger in the air about, well, actually, lots of my clients come from referrals. So maybe that's something that I should be looking at in terms of putting a bit more effort in, as opposed to creating all this content that's going out on social media that gets crickets every time. Now, it was interesting that you said actually about people not commenting, but they're still watching. So don't ever worry too much about engagement. There's lots of vanity metrics that people get caught up in. So number of followers, number of likes, all that engagement stuff. The real thing that matters is conversions. If everything that you're doing is not resulting in anybody coming through and working with you and paying you, then something somewhere's not working. So we need to have a look at that. But there's so many different ways to be visible. It isn't just about social media. And that's the other thing. I think people automatically go to Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever it is that there is the platform of choice, because that's the most prevalent way of getting visible and people see it all the time. But it's actually one of the hardest most time-consuming visibility forms that there is. When I first started, it was so much easier to build an audience online. People are so much more distracted now, they're so much more discerning, which is obviously a good thing. But that kind of visibility, you can put so much effort into it and it builds absolutely nothing for you. So I would definitely be saying to people to look at the natural propensities that you have. So, like, for example, us now podcasting, talking about these things, whether it's writing and blogging or using forms that have a longevity and can be repurposed so that, again, they're working smart for you. And you can have content that will last and people will be able to find you over a long period of time. Like you were saying, if people have come out from the vets and they've got this diagnosis or they've got a behavioral problem or they've got a something, what are they going to do first? They're going to Google it, or they're going to ask AI, or they're going to ask for referrals or recommendations within perhaps a local Facebook group. So if you are not popping up when people search for those things, they're not necessarily going to find you. So think about longevity, think about search, think about, like you've said, being part of those networks and leveraging other people's audiences. So hanging around with the right people. It's very, very hard to build an audience one person at a time. So if you can go out and work in the right circles, it shortcuts that process. You know, at least you're with the right people. You're not just shouting into the abyss hoping that somebody hears you. So yeah, it's finding the things that are going to make a difference to what you're trying to achieve, really. So take it that collaborating with other people and showing up in the right communities has made a big difference for you in terms of your visibility. How are you approaching that differently than you would say just posting as you were previously, perhaps on social media?
Yeah, when I first started, it was in that era where all the coaches or business advice was Monday post this content, Tuesday post this content,
Oh, yeah.
you remember
Have a
those days.
theme to the day.
And then
Have-
one of the theme would always be like humor, and you just be sharing posts from other places. And I
Mm,
remember thinking that's what you're supposed to do, but it never felt right to me. It never felt,
mm,
and then you would get lots of engagement with the Wednesday, which was the cute day or the funny
yeah,
day, but like nothing to do with animal communication. So it used to, and then I would have to pay people to find these posts and create these posts. So right at the
yeah,
beginning, I was spending money before I was making money. And so, yeah, it just didn't work. I learned the hard way. And absolutely, the theme for me, the last few couple of years, I think because of the things that are changing, is collaboration, is getting together with like-minded professionals as well, and showing that you can all share the same values and be aligned in terms of your ethics and your passion for animal communication, yet also really promote how unique and different you are. And that I think has really been a game changer, because not only psychologically, what it did was, because a lot of animal communicators, I think we tend to work in isolation. So what will happen is that, like you say, just because you're not commenting on the post doesn't mean you're not watching, which is what we're all doing. We're watching other communicators, other professionals, and how they're doing it. So collaboration stops. There's almost like a way of comparing with each other, or
mm,
yeah, all of that stuff, which is not really healthy. But also recently, there's been a lot more conferences, online conferences and summits. I find that they really bring in a lot of leads, a lot of new
yeah,
people. But you see, it doesn't stop there, which is exactly what you mean. You can do the visibility bit,
yeah,
attract a whole new audience, but that's just the beginning. You've
yeah,
got to get your messaging right. So if I did a summit where I was a guest speaker, I might initially bring in 100 new people into my world. But very quickly, I'll see maybe like 20, 30 leave already because
hmm,
they liked you at the speak, but then they're not aligned, or they don't really need you at that moment in time. So you watch that, and then you continue to be clear with what are, for me, it's the end of life, it's the communicating with your own animals. Some communicators are about communicating with other people's animals or with wildlife. Mine is with your own animals. So
Mm.
then you might see some more people leave, but then you see a set kind of status of people staying, and then that's when the nurturing really begins. So maybe what we can do, just to kind of round off this episode, is talk about the longevity, because I think this is really where it goes awry, that we're not shown that visibility and your relationship with your audience is actually a long-term relationship. So you move from the
Hmm.
dating
Yeah.
into the kind of the long-term relationship. We are so into this instant gratification. I put a post out. I put a post out that I was going to do a special 50% discount on my consult. I didn't get anybody. I put a course out and I'm saying flash sale, and I only got one sign up. And so what's all this about, thinking we're going to do it, we're going to get bookings straight away? And actually, the longer you're in this business, you actually respect longevity. So let's
Yeah.
talk about that as a kind of a round off.
Yeah, I think we're just sold this thing, aren't we? That, you do this thing and you get this outcome. And if only that was the case. And there's so much, like we've seen in the online space, so much noise about, growing your followers, 10,000 followers overnight or in a week or this, that, and the other. And it's absolute nonsense, a lot of it. Or like you say, it does bring those people in, but they're not the right people necessarily. So for me, it's always been about quality over quantity. So you don't have to have a big list. You don't have to have a massive readership of a blog. You've just got to have the right people that stay with you for a long period of time. That's going to be far more successful for your business than trying to beat the churn of adding new people in constantly, because that in itself is just exhausting. You're constantly chasing sales and doing all of the things to try and generate the sale before you even think about delivering it. So it's again, some of that structure comes into play at this stage is thinking about, if I'm going to spend all this effort and time and sometimes money to generate a lead or generate somebody into my world, I don't want them skipping off out of the door after 5 minutes. I want to keep them with me for as long as possible. So one of the metrics that I will use to measure how successful I'm being is the lifetime value of that client. So I look at, on average, how long does somebody stay with me when they work with me? Now, I've had people that have been working with me for the whole time that I've been self-employed, which is unusual for a lot of people. But if I say, for example, average lifetime is 6 years for somebody to come with me, then it's worth me actually spending some time at the front end working out, how do I get another one of those instead of me getting three other random people in. I want another one of those people because I know that that's going to bring me X amount of income in every month, every year, and I'm not scrabbling around trying to make ends meet all of the time. So I'm always looking for content that's going to last, which is very difficult sometimes, especially in the world that I work in, perhaps not so much for you. But when I'm talking about technology, when I'm talking about strategies, they're constantly moving. The goalposts are changing all the time. We're having to adapt because the buyer's behavior is changing. They're becoming more discerning, this, that, and the other. So we're looking for things that people are searching for. We're looking for environments and relationships where they will always be. So having those longer term relationships and collaborations that where people will regularly come through to you. It may be drip fed every now and again, but that's far better to have that than have a massive influx of people that have come from an ad, but they're just not qualified, and so they're going to head out the door again. So look at what you want your business to do and how you want to structure it. How do you want to work with people? Who are the people that you want to work with? Where are they hanging out? What do they want to hear? What can you do to help them to generate that business and to generate that relationship? Um, and how can you have those conversations on a regular basis? Because actually, it's the conversations that tend to convert as opposed to just the broadcasting that goes on. So establish your authority, establish your expertise in ways that will last. So one solid blog post about a question that gets asked constantly will do you so much more. What's the word I'm looking for? It will do so much more for your business than potentially a whole month's worth of social media posts. I've got a video on YouTube, in actual fact, which is massively, massively out of date. And it was about something to do with LinkedIn, extracting and pulling the names of your contacts from LinkedIn. So this is once upon a time when you could do that. Now, obviously, they've shut that down because why would they want to allow you to have access to people? And I still, probably 9 years later, get comments from people on that video because it's turning up the search that they are looking for. Now, the video itself is way out of date, but people are still finding it and still thinking, oh, I'm going to watch this in case it gives me the answer to what I'm looking for. So know what they're looking for, know what questions they're answering, know what the internal conversations they're having, and answer those questions in a way that can be found over a long period of time. And it's going to stand you in good stead, I think.
A brilliant summary. Thank you. And also what you said about conversations, lead to conversions. And that ties in with animal communication in the sense that it's all about communicating.
Yeah.
So not just communicating with animals, but communicating with the humans of the animals, because it's the human in control
Yeah.
of being, the one aspect that helps the animal. So us as the animal communicators need to have these conversations with the human to then say, we are here to help you and to help you feel safe. So yeah,
Mm.
as always, we have so much to talk about, but good to know that we've got another episode coming up where we can cover more. For you listeners out here, this is what I want you to take away from this episode is that if you've been working hard, showing up everywhere, and still not seeing the income you expected, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means something is misaligned. Visibility without clarity creates noise, and noise does not convert, and more effort doesn't fix that. So, what makes the difference is direction, knowing who you're speaking to, where you're showing up, and why your work matters to them. Because when that becomes clear, everything starts to feel lighter, and your effort begins to work for you, not against you. In our next episode, we take this a step further. What happens when your work starts to stabilize? What does a business actually look like when it becomes predictable, sustainable, and supportive of your life? Because clarity is the turning point. But what you build from that clarity is what creates longevity. I'll see you in episode 6.